Folsom Lake to Lake Tahoe, your backyard, where freedom grows. Oh, tall and strong as a cedar trees, it's liberty in EDC.
Hey everybody, welcome to Liberty in EDC. I'm Daniel, your host, and we're here with Jacob Thomas, who is running for the 4th District for Congress.
Yep, it's very nice to meet you, Daniel. It's great to be on the show.
Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you.
So tell us a little bit about you. Who's Jacob?
Well, I'm a local. I was born and raised in the area, born and raised in Amador County. I kind of grew up with a working class family down there. My father was a mechanic. He really instilled a strong work ethic from an early age. The first job I had was actually at 11. I started working for the ranch that was just across the street, an alpaca ranch. And so, kind of that work ethic has carried me through my whole life, and that's really a big part of who I am. Ever since I started that first job at 11, I've really never stopped moving. I'm really hoping to bring a local perspective to Congress. I feel that right now there's a lot of interests that are, present, the special interest groups and the political party interests, but there's really not a local interest. I feel like people aren't as interested in what the local communities need, and especially our rural communities. I feel like there's a lot of money and backing for the cities and those communities, but I don't think there's a strong voice out there for the rural community. So I'm hoping to bring that.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more. Why do you want to run for the 4th District for Congress?
It's kind of just the evolution of my, my business progression and my kind of search for public service. At 16, I started in this organization, the Juvenile Justice Youth Advisory Board, and we advised the Juvenile Justice Commission in Amador County as to things they could bring into the county to help our youth, because the youth in the county is kind of struggling with, there's just not much in the county for young people to do. There's not a lot of activities, and there's not a lot of education as far as, what's right, what's wrong, and various ways that they can build themselves up. And so, that was kind of my first step. And that was really educational as far as the whole process of nonprofit organizations. And so, we had a few community events. Really, it wasn't as well received from the youth as I think the organization had hoped. We did a lot of DUI court resentencings and stuff like that, really trying to drive home the danger and cost of DUI. And some of the kids, maybe took it at heart, but some of the rest of them, you're like, I'm never going to get a DUI. So, but from there, when I graduated high school, it was supposed to be mostly a high school age-oriented group. And so from there, my family, we had moved up to El Dorado County. And so pretty much my entire family joined El Dorado County Search and Rescue. And it started with my parents had joined while I was out in Alaska for a pipe fitter's apprenticeship interview. And when I came back, I kind of just jumped in with them and got the ball rolling. And I was really big in that for a few years. I was some of the Swiftwater team leadership. I was the assistant training officer.
Swiftwater?
Yeah. Swiftwater's kind of always been a big thing for our family. We really enjoy going out to the rivers, and
That's for search and rescue, right?
Yeah. That was quite the experience. There's really nothing like jumping headfirst into raging rapids, especially after somebody who already did and needs assistance. So that was quite the experience.
Yeah, El Dorado County, we definitely have people who like to get lost out here.
Yeah, especially up towards Tahoe. Those were some of the more extreme calls, were the Tahoe calls. In fact, we had a plane that went missing quite a few years back, probably three years back now. And they brought out the National Guard, and we were using Black Hawk helicopters, and they were flying us out to our search segments. And
wow. And you got to be a part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was real fun. It was an unfortunate circumstance, but it was a nice way to explore the backcountry that you otherwise couldn't reach. So and we ended up finding the subject that day, and so, which was probably for the best, because it was getting pretty cold. It was snowy out there, and we were worried we were going to have to stay out there overnight for another night.
Yeah.
So we were pretty happy when they got the call.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm sure, survivability goes down a lot out there in the
Yeah.
cold once it starts getting dark.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was already kind of too late for the gentleman that had gone missing. Because it was a plane wreck. So at that
Gotcha.
point, it was more of a recovery. But at least you get to bring closure to the families.
Oh, yeah.
To be honest, with search and rescue, that's a lot of what it is. The Tahoe section of search and rescue, they get to do a lot of hands-on rescues and stuff like that. But unfortunately, in the West Slope, it's often a little bit more bringing closure and just doing the job.
Oh, what do you think draws you to doing search and rescue? What do you enjoy about that?
What first brought me and my family's interest was that we had been such avid outdoor explorers, and so that's kind of the first appeal. It's a way to run off into the woods and go do exciting things, and at the same time try to help your community. And so that was what first brought our interest. And then from there, there were so many good people in the organization, so many amazing sheriffs that we got to work with, and so many amazing leaders in the organization. We quickly became part of the Type 1 ground team, which is the section of search and rescue that deals with the high altitude searches and a little bit more high risk. And then, again, we quickly realized we were interested in the Swiftwater team, and so we became a large part of that team. Again, I think it's just the adrenaline and the risk aspect of it. We logged about 300 hours in the 2 years that we were in there in personal trainings, trying to become familiarized and knowledgeable about the Swiftwater environment. Because though it's a lot of fun, when you start your training, kind of the first thing they teach you is that it's a miracle you've survived in the water so far. And, everybody kind of ends up scared after the first portion of the training. And then the next portion of the training is how do you continue to survive in the water? And then the third portion is kind of how do you save those that are in the water and need assistance.
Wow. So when you're out there doing search and rescue, like diving into that water, that, you're taking a huge risk yourself too.
Yeah, it's definitely a risk. That's why, training was one of the most important things. If you knew what you were doing, though it was dangerous, you were never really at risk. And our sheriff's deputies and sergeant was real good about making sure that, whatever we were doing, wasn't actually putting our lives at risk.
Now something like an issue that you're interested in as well, right, is, like our national forests and, opening up that BLM land and stuff like that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, something that that my family has kind of observed, as I was growing up, was that constantly our public lands were being restricted. There were areas that I enjoyed as a kid that, currently you couldn't reach at this point. And I think a lot of that was driven by, environmental protection interests, which, I don't blame them. It is important to, take care of our environment. Like you see a lot of people coming up out of the cities into our forests, they're leaving garbage. They're really trashing the environment, unfortunately. And so I realize that a lot of the regulation is in hopes to preserve it, but often I find that it more restricts the access of those who live around the forests and would like to enjoy it.
Yeah, and I know we've seen a huge increase of like cartels going into our national forests because they've been closed off.
Yeah.
It's kind of like made a gated garden for them to, go do these huge marijuana grows and, just massive, ecological damage and everything that they do out there. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a lot of the fertilizers, their manners of moving the water that they need for their plants, and then just there's actually a public safety issue with that because when I was growing up there was an area that everybody kind of knew people were growing, and so you just stayed out of that area because you didn't want to end up dealing with any any dangerous individuals, especially as a kid. And so that's kind of another way that a lot of our public and national forests are being restricted, from the access to the public, is because you have to constantly worry about running into something like that.
yeah.
As we've learned recently, it can become deadly, and beyond that, I'd like to see state and federal legislation to expand the use of our public lands. I'd like to see, maybe some more parks built around the areas that people already get to enjoy, rather than closing off the areas people have been enjoying for years. If you created a system, like our Parks and Recreational Services already do, for people to maintain those areas, I think that we could all enjoy them without destroying the environment.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you were a Congress member, how could you affect that?
The Bureau of Land Management is a federal organization, and it receives its funding through congressional finance appropriations. So, I would say that it's the duty of Congress to, make certain that the interests of the American people are being kept in heart, and through the checkbook,
How do we make sure that, they do have that heart, though? Like how would you want to do that?
Probably one of the biggest things that I'd like to see done in Congress is I'd like to see more local voice in Congress. And that's not necessarily to say, though I would love to see it, more people from their local communities being elected into Congress. That's a great first step. But they need to have a better narrative and more communication with their community. One of the things that I've seen a lot about, from my other competing candidates when they're talking about the incumbent Tom McClintock, is they feel that he's not engaging with our communities as much as he should be. And so if you're not engaging with the communities, hearing their issues and hearing their concerns, then how can you know how they feel and what they'd like to see change? And so that's really something that I would like to bring, is more of a personal voice. We use a lot of Facebook marketing for both of our businesses, and it's been a huge way of reaching out to the constituents in this district for my campaign. And I feel that we should be utilizing the social media networks because they're there, utilizing them to communicate and get a better idea of what our constituents would like to see done. If you're not informed in what the community wants, then how can you bring that to Congress?
Yeah. Now, so I mean, how old are you?
I'm 24.
Okay. Yeah. So you're pretty young. So I mean, what makes you want to run for politics? I mean, this is your first time running for an office, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So what was kind of that? What sparked you to want to do this?
There's not enough youth involved in politics nowadays, in my opinion. Often they say that the young voters, that the young folk aren't getting out and voting, aren't having their voice heard. And so I'm hoping that, getting some youth in the actual running can maybe motivate a little bit of them to become more politically involved. Just talking to some other young folk in the beginning of my campaign, they really got excited about the idea of somebody their age or even younger than them getting involved in politics. And so really hoping to bring out the young voters.
Yeah. So why is that important for you? Like getting youth involved? Just
because, again, if you don't know the interests of the youth and what they would like to see done, then how can you represent them? If the young voters, I think they feel that that Congress is full of, older folks that have older ideals. How can you make certain that their interests are being taken care of without younger representation? There are a few state legislations that I feel if young folks could have got out and said that they didn't approve and that they weren't backing it, that maybe we could have made a difference, and these state legislations wouldn't be taken away from their rights. I feel like there's a little bit of a movement to make the younger population less influential in our communities and take away more of their rights because they have less of a voice. You try to take away the rights of an older gentleman with money and influence. He can make his voice heard, but you try to take away the rights of a young person who's not well organized and not well funded. How are they going to oppose it? How are they going to say anything? Recently, we've seen the legal age of buying cigarettes, raised from 18 to 21. And though I'm not necessarily a supporter of smoking, I believe it's your right to do what you'd like with your own life. And, I felt that was kind of something that most young folks, especially the ones who were already 18 and smoking, as soon as they raised that age, that just made all of those people that were smoking at 18, no longer allowed to buy cigarettes.
When was that? I didn't hear about this. I mean, I'm not a smoker, so it's not.
Yeah. It was probably about 3 years ago. And yeah, I'm not a smoker either. The way I caught onto it was, let's see, I was 20 years old. I was going to be 21 in a few months. And a friend of mine asked me to stop by and pick him up a pack of smokes on my way over. And so I was like, yeah, no problem. And so I went in and I was like, okay, yeah, I'd like to get that. And they're like, oh, can I see your ID? And I handed it to her and she says, how old are you? And I said, 20. And she's like, you can't buy this. And I was like, what do you mean I can't buy that? Like, I never even heard of the legislation until it had already passed. And so,
I mean, I'm just hearing about it now. Like, I've had no idea.
Yeah, and it affected so many people, and yet so many people probably didn't even know about it until it affected them. So, again, you just have to get young folk into representation, and you got to get them mobilized and voting and, having their voice heard, or they're going to continue to lose their rights and their voice.
What other, issues that are out there that you're passionate about?
A lot of the issues that I'm passionate about are driven by what I view as our rights, and the rights that are being taken away from us as American citizens. A few of the other districts, they're perhaps not as concerned about these rights as our community is, and so I think they're happy with their current representation. But our community is constantly having their rights impeded. Whether it's the right to buy arms, the right to buy ammunition to utilize those arms, the right to free speech, the right to the freedom of religion, everything. I feel that California is kind of systematically removing all of the rights that we were guaranteed in the United States Constitution Bill of Rights. And so I would like to see the federal government start to step in and take a more proactive role in defending those rights.
Yeah, so one of those things you listed was, the Second Amendment. So, if you're elected to Congress, what do you see your role in, protecting that amendment?
Well, one of the things I'd like to see done in Congress is reaffirming the fact that we have these rights and reaffirming that the federal government supports these rights. Because right now, we're at the point of combating new gun legislation that's trying to remove the rights, but we're not, supporting it. And so it kind of gets left to the states to decide, what we can and cannot do on the Second Amendment. California is a great example of that. The federal government doesn't ban, semi-automatic rifles, doesn't ban, high-capacity magazines, whereas California takes that step and does that. And they believe that that's not violation of the Constitution, but I believe that it's the job of Congress to reaffirm that that is a violation of our constitutional rights, and that actually write a law and pass a law that points that out. Because the only way that we can check the abuse of power through the states is through the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has to, say, well, that's that's not constitutional, or the Supreme Court has to say that that violates the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution, and that federal law supersedes these state laws. And then that gives the federal government the ability to reinforce their law. But if there is no law written on it, it's kind of just an open playing field for all the states to decide, how much of the right can we take away before it violates the Constitution. So I'd like to see the federal government reaffirm all of our rights.
Now, where do you kind of stand on the issue of, federal versus state and all that stuff?
Well, the United States Constitution pretty explicitly describes what the federal government has the right to regulate, and what states, are left to regulate, which is anything not specifically mandated by the Constitution. And so I think that the federal government perhaps gets carried away and feels, that it should be covering all of these things that aren't explicitly written in the Constitution, because it's more for the welfare of the United States people, but they're again, not reinforcing the rights that they have, such as the right to control immigration. California's sanctuary state law, directly violates the Constitution and, the fact that that is supposed to be federally regulated. And so again, with the Second Amendment, I believe that the federal government needs to stop putting their hand in everything and start, standing up for what their job is. So I believe that the states have their job and the federal government has theirs. I'd like to see people stick to their roles a little bit more.
Yeah. Now you said, not doing their role. What do you see like the number one role of government being? To get kind of into the philosophy of government a little bit.
The number one role of the government is to, protect our nation, protect the sovereignty of our nation. The next role would probably be defend our constitutional rights, make certain that the rights that we were born with are protected. One of a right that you are absolutely born with is the right to defend yourself. And I feel like that is kind of under attack nowadays. At least in California, I haven't got to see how it plays out in other states, but I know that even as a youth growing up in the education system, if you defend yourself in school, you're liable to get suspended. It's happened many, many times to me as a young man. And I feel like that's kind of systematic and continues through your life as an adult. You can hardly stand up for yourself without fear of somebody pressing charges. You can't defend your own home without.
Hi, I'm Rick Grove, owner of Placerville Polaris and Power Tools. I've owned and operated Placerville Polaris since 2007. If you'd like to experience the off-road, or if you have property in our community, come on in. Let's see what we can build for you. We are your one-stop shop for off-road fun. We do it all, from building your dream toy to decking out your razor. We are complete with a full shop, and we proudly service all our products, including our power tools. We carry only the best top quality brands, and we have everything you need for taking care of your property and maintaining your 100-foot defensible fire space. Building off-road vehicles is a passion of mine that I take very seriously. I like to be personally involved in building your dream toy from start to finish. Here at Placerville Polaris, we do a lot of testing for the manufacturers to ensure you get the proper accessories to fit your specific needs. One of my favorite parts is test driving to maximize satisfaction and quality. Come on in. Let's see what we can build for you.
Fear of somebody pressing charges.
How do you see you affecting change for that in the Congress?
For one, there are federally appropriated education funds, that go to all the schools. I'd like to see the little bit of control that the federal government does have over education start to help the students that are kind of, out on the outskirts of what's standard and what's normal. Because, again, that's where a lot of the self-defense comes in. Normally you're getting made fun of because you're an outside of the normal student, and so, you should have the right to defend yourself. Beyond that, I also feel that the education system somewhat vilifies students who can't conform, who can't sit still, when often I feel that some of the personality traits that makes for a bad student makes for a great businessman. The ability to multitask or the inability to sit still, often those kinds of things are what drives an active and passionate individual to make change in the society around them. So I don't know. There's a lot of possible education reform. It's a very difficult and dynamic situation. Guns becomes another part of the education conversation, unfortunately, due to the shootings that we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
People are trying to decide whether or not they should take guns away in order to make the community safer, make our students safer, whether or not we should, be introducing more guns in order to protect our students, whether or not, we should be spending more on mental health programs. I was actually down with the Amador County Unified School District speaking with their superintendent and assistant superintendent on the 4th, and that was real educational, and they gave me some of their personal and educational opinions on, they'd like to see some increases in funding and some changes in policy. But I think
like what?
Kind of the way they put it to me is it was more of a state issue rather than a federal issue, because if the federal government is going to increase the education funding to one school, they got to increase it to everybody. And so that can become exponentially increasing financial burden on the federal government and therefore the taxpayers. California is, I think, the 47th least funded state per student. And so they were pushing the state legislation to increase funding to them because one of their issues, again, was infrastructure. And I guess they were saying nearly all of their buildings in one form or another leak. Many of their buildings are over 100 years old. And so, they do what they can with the budget that they're given, but they could really really use more funding. So that was one of their biggest issues. Besides that, again, really pushing mental health and trying to figure out, what changes need to be made to make our schools safer.
Now, what role does mental health have with, our education system?
Well, again, they're more the education professionals than I am. I have my own personal views. It wasn't that long ago that I was in school. I still remember what it was like. And luckily, we had a very safe schooling district. I never felt that we ever had the likelihood of a shooter incident or anything of that sort. Though it was constantly on everybody's mind because it was an issue that the nation has been dealing with for so long. My understanding from them is that they would like to expand the ability to recognize the way that people act and preempt of an issue. They're trying to catch a situation before it evolves. And so I guess they, for the longest time, didn't have a psychiatrist on any of the county's education board. And so I guess they recently got a new psychiatrist that's supposed to be serving, I think, the Tri-County area. But again, that would more be a question for them for a longer time.
Yeah. Now, where do you kind of fall in that debate of, more guns, less guns, school shooting in our schools?
It's really a difficult issue because, I know that a lot of conservatives would like to see us arm our teachers. And whereas I don't necessarily disagree, as a student, I remember teachers that I would certainly not like to have seen armed. And, that starts to kind of bridge into the teacher unions and, making certain that we have appropriate educators in our schooling systems. But luckily, again, in Amador County, we didn't seem to feel the need to have an armed guard or anything of that sort. But the superintendent did tell me a little bit more about when she was working in the Sacramento area, and they did have security resource officers that were armed guards, that were actually employees of the local police department that would kind of get lent out to the school so that they could make certain that the environment is safe. Again, we luckily didn't have to have that in Amador County at our schools, and from what I've heard from the community around here, I don't think we need that in El Dorado County either. So it's really a hard question what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure which way I fall on it either. Or, well, actually, let me run an idea by you here. It's just kind of something I was thinking about, like what would you think about decentralizing schools where it's not so much what we think of the normal public school where kids are going to school for X hours a day. It's more of a unified curriculum through online and stuff like that, where we don't necessarily have campuses, but there might be a check-in or still teachers involved, but I guess a lot more remote.
I do agree that there are ways we could expand our education system to very likely become far more productive. For one, I feel that a lot of our current education system is lacking in vocational training. We're kind of seeing a decrease in the skilled laborers available. Specifically, I work in the landscaping and construction industry, and it's something that I've contended with. People want exemplary pay, but they don't have the hands-on knowledge and skills to perform the manual labor that's required of them.
Yeah.
And so I think that schools could do a better job of opening up the curriculum and making it more available for other kinds of vocational education that's not necessarily in the schools, so that you don't have to, show up every day, do your 8 to 3 bit and then go home and work on homework all night. If there was more of an open format to it, I think that could be constructive. In fact, my girlfriend, Anastasia Carson, she recently started a an equestrian training business, as well as a rider training business. And when she was growing up, she actually had an education system that was very similar to that. She was able to, I believe, take a couple hours off of school every single day and focus on her education as an equestrian professional. And that's the direction she's wanted to go her whole life. So rather than, over focusing on our standardized education system where she grew up, they were more so able to let her take the direction she knew she wanted to go. And especially she was homeschooled for quite a bit of her youth. And through the use of homeschool, her mother was able to, they were actually able to work with other local families in the area, and they would take turns teaching the students. And it was a very tight-knit group. But they were able to take breaks from schooling and, again, focus on, what did the students want to learn, what direction did they want to go. And since, it's a very farm-like environment, a lot of them took interest in agricultural aspects. So there's definitely other forms of education besides the 8 to 3, and then, you graduate junior high, go through high school, and now to go to college. There are much different ways to go.
Yeah.
Again, I personally wasn't college educated. I learned doing it all myself and doing it by my hands. I think that I could far better work in my industry now with the knowledge I know from, just jumping into it head first than if I was getting out of college at this point, which a lot of people my age are. Just getting out of college, you frankly got all this debt. You don't really have a direction to go. You've got, perhaps book learned education, but no practical application. So.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your business. Like when did you start that, or how did that get going, all that stuff?
So when I graduated high school at 17, I went to work at a local vineyard, Easton Wines in the Shenandoah Valley. And I worked there for about 8 months until time came that I had intended to go to Alaska for a pipe fitter's apprenticeship. And so I flew out there. And
what's pipe fitters exactly?
That would be the welders that work on the pipeline. I had some practical application as far as welding, and it was a real exciting career choice. It's a little bit unorthodox, but you go out to the wilderness, you brave the cold, and you work on the pipeline. I don't know, it's very American. When I first started working at the winery, I had first let the owner know, when it comes time, I'm going to be leaving so that I can pursue this. And so I went out and did the interview. I placed, I believe, 25th out of about 400 people. But then I came back to my family and came back to the community without a job and without a direction. The pipe fitter's apprenticeship, they had told me, when we get to your number, we'll call you. If we don't get to your number, we won't call you. So I just needed something to do in the meantime. And my father had suggested that we build a couple of sandwich signs and that I go sit out at one of the local lots in the area with a weed eater and advertise some landscaping services. So the lot that is across from Poor Red's, I went out there with a chair, my truck, a few tools, and a weed eater, and I'd sit out there and wave at every single person as they drove by. And people seemed to really respect that go-get-'em attitude, as well as kind of the personal connection it almost created between you and each customer. There were people that would actually just stop by to say hello sometimes. It wasn't all business. It was really almost community outreach at that point. And I began to really enjoy it. When I was busy working, I missed the opportunity to bond with the community out there marketing. And so we did that for quite a few years. When everything went slow, I'd go back out to the corner and I'd market. Eventually our tools grew and grew. At some point we got a tractor, and I'm sitting out there with my green tractor and all the tools across the side and some signage. A lot of people would stop, and we got a lot of work that way. But eventually we kind of outgrew it, and I kind of regret that. I miss being so small time, being so community. But we ended up growing outside of that, started doing a lot of Facebook marketing, reaching out to larger communities. We service anywhere within 50 miles of Shingle Springs. And it got to the point where I was doing more of the business side of it than I was the manual labor. We hired a few family members, and they started handling the work on the day-to-day while I would go out and do all of the estimates, pretty well 3 estimates a day all week. just looking for the next job, And that was still nice because I got to communicate with people on a personal level. They invite you out to their home. They let you know what their dream is, and you tell them whether or not it's possible and what it's going to cost. So I still really enjoyed that.
Cool. So how big is the company now?
Right now, the company, we're kind of out of season for landscaping, because of the rain, because of the weather.
Yeah.
We're still active, but we downsized a little bit. We're doing work between rain. We're doing tree.
When you guys were going full this summer, like how big are you guys?
Generally 2 teams running full time,
Great.
about 4 people on each team.
Awesome.
This year we actually bridged more into construction.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, we got our general contractor's license and started working on some remodels, some bathroom remodels, whole house remodels. Started getting a little bit more into that. I really enjoy it personally, but the landscaping has always been our bread and butter. But having the general contractor's license, we started getting into more construction on the landscape site. The pergolas and gazebos, things of that sort.
What's a pergola? I have no idea.
A pergola is just generally a patio cover.
Oh, okay.
But normally it's made out of redwood lumber, and it's got a partial open design across the top so that you're getting some shade, while still getting some sun. It's very aesthetic. You can go so far as to put a solid roof on it, but I think a lot of people wanted it more for the aesthetics. It really created a place where people can go, sit, relax, your room outside. Enjoy just hanging out with your friends and your family.
Yeah. Now, what's your business called? I'm sure there's some people who are watching this who are like, oh, I want him. I want his company.
Thomas Landscaping is the landscaping company, and Thomas Construction is the construction company. Estimates are always free, so all anybody has to do is reach out to us over Facebook or call or text or something of that sort.
Okay. Where can people get a hold of you at?
Well, actually, we also have websites for both companies, so you can probably find us online. But if you look for us on Facebook, you should be able to search Thomas Landscaping or Thomas Construction and find us. Or you're welcome to call me at 209-781-6126 or text. Available most any day, and again, estimates are always free, so there's no harm in trying to figure out what your dreams cost. Trying to get things moving in the right direction. And we've done a lot of design as well. A lot of people know what they'd like to see, but they don't know how it all fits together. Maybe they have trouble imagining it, and so we always do an on-site design. Draw it out so that you understand what you're getting, where things are going to go, and get a real comprehensive understanding. So. The landscaping really is about making people's dreams happen. The construction is more, everybody needs it, so you're giving people what they need, but the landscaping is always something they want. They haven't been able to do it, they've been saving for years, and they'd really like to see their dream come true. So
Yeah, that's cool. Now, is there any other issues that, or, you feel very passionate about that, you're like, man, if I get in Congress, like I want these, I can't wait to affect these different things.
More on a civil rights side, and it parallels again with the gun control. Something I would really like to see is the return of American civil rights to those who've been convicted of crimes. Something that I've seen a lot with firearms specifically. As a felon, you're not allowed to own a firearm, regardless of when the crime was committed. What kind of crime it was. If it's a felony, you can't own a firearm. You also can't vote. And I'd like to, at the bare minimum, see felons, get the right to vote back. You've made it out of the prison system. You've at least attempted to reform. Why is your right to free speech still being limited? Why don't you get to have representation? You still pay taxes. You still go to work every day. You're still a functioning part of society. I'd really like to see some of the civil rights return to those who are part of our society and part of our economy.
And you would want to see that returned, like basically once they're off parole, all that stuff, like they're a member of society again. Probably
the right to vote, frankly, as soon as they're out of the prison system, whether they're on parole or not, I don't think it's right that they don't have the ability to speak for themselves, through legislation. The firearms is a bit more of a touchy subject, especially in California. You know, you can't have somebody immediately come out of the prison system and, you know, here, go ahead and buy a gun.
Yeah.
Don't do anything bad with it. But as a lot of the conversation has always shown too, if you want a gun, you know, if you're a criminal or, you know, an individual looking to do something against the law, it's not that hard to find firearms. They're also likely cheaper than, you know, legally acquired firearms. You know, there's a wealth of ways to break the law, and it would be a difficult conversation to find out at what point should you return people's right to bear arms. I would definitely like somebody to come up with a system for returning civil rights to those who have had them taken from them.
Yeah, and you know, something that is important to myself, where do you fall on that subject, on the right to life?
Well, on the education aspect of it, you know, I absolutely think that it's a violation of the parents' rights for anybody to assist in the facilitation of you know, medical concerns. You know, it wouldn't be up to the schools to decide, you know, what drugs your student, you know, can and cannot take. You know, they're not going to help you go to the doctor, you know, for, you know, medical concerns. You know, I'd like to see schools take less of a role in interfering with the way that children are raised and interfering with the parents' rights to parent their own children. On the right to life, you know, I do frankly believe that the life begins at conception. You know, we consider many single-cell organisms to be alive. You know, why do we change the distinction when it becomes a human being? You know, at the same time, I don't want to force my opinion on other folk, but that doesn't mean I agree with it. Which actually, what you were mentioning about the schooling system and how the education facilities kind of are somewhat involved in that reminds me that, again, I'd like to see schools take a lesser role in the parenting of children.
Yeah.
I've known folks who have had issues with their kids, and the educational facilities often complicate the issue far more often than they assist. You know, for instance, CPS can show up and take your kids from your school, you know, simply from a complaint. You know, schools are required to inform government organizations of complaints, you know, before ever talking to the parents. You know, I'd really like to see families united and unified rather than being pulled apart. And I feel like often, you know, Child Protective Services as well as education both play a part in separating families. I'd really like to see Child Protective Services take a step back from intervening and maybe take more of a proactive role. You know, if they want to, you know, use their funds to help, first off, help families that are struggling. You know, rather than taking the child away because the family's struggling, why not help out the family? It's going to cost the same amount. You're going to pay $1,000 a month, at least, I'm pretty sure, to pay for a foster parent. Why not just help out the family that's struggling? Can you imagine what $1,000 a month would do for a low-income family? You know, that's going to help put food on the table. And, you know, again, if they want to, you know, spend some of their resources on assisting in mental health of parents and children, and, you know, what it's going to take for those parents and children to get together and get along and not fight, you know, I think that would be far more productive than snatching up kids and taking them away from their families.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely. I mean, I definitely, you know, we want to find out, you know, if some of our audience is interested in, you know, like donating to your campaign, you know, learning more about you, you know, all that stuff. But before we get there, you know, anything else you want to add?
You know, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there anything else that you want to add?
I think that I got a chance at winning this, and I think the reason for that is because I think a lot of the local community would really like somebody to champion their interests, and that's really what I'm here for. You know, a lot of the money that was raised to get through my declaration of candidacy that I did today at 3, a lot of that was from family, and some of that was from myself. I don't have any special interest groups backing me. I'm not a lifelong politician, moving into my next career. I wasn't flown out of state to change the political topography around here. I'm just, I'm a young man who was raised in this area, raised hard, worked hard, and I know that I can take that work ethic and the lessons I've learned from it and try to make a big voice for that. And, I really think that people have been supporting it so far. I know it's a little scary to support somebody that you don't know anything about. The devil is safer than the devil you don't. But I think that my personal experience and what I've done so far shows that I'm not here in the interests of special interest groups or political parties or anything. I'm here because I'm a forceful individual. I don't like to sit still, and I'd like to help this community have its voice heard. So.
Awesome. That's great.
If people would like to donate, it would of course be greatly appreciated. Again, we don't have any special interest groups funding us, so it's very family oriented. My sister is kind of my unofficial campaign manager at this point. She's done a lot to help me get there, and same thing with my father. And I'd really like to get more of the community involved in the campaign. In fact, if you go to our website, there's a survey where you can tell me, what's important to you and the changes you'd like to see made. Because, again, I just really want to make the changes that our community wants.
What's that website?
The website is jacobthomasforcongress.com, and there's plenty of buttons on there for getting involved. We're looking for volunteers or anybody who can help. Not just financially, but help spread the word and help get people involved. We're really taking a community approach to the candidacy. Also, we're on Facebook. If you search at JT for Congress, that should pull up our page. We're also on Twitter, though I'm still learning how that works.
Right on. Yeah, well, thank you for coming in, man. We really appreciate it. And so check out his website if you have interest in helping out, and or if you want to donate, learn a little bit more about him. And this is Liberty and EDC. You can find us on Comcast Channel 7 here in El Dorado County, and at youtube.com/Foothill7TV. See you guys later.
Hi, my name is Jeff Gutierrez, one of the owners of True Value Hardware on Missouri Flat Road. My parents are the original owners and bought the store 36 years ago. I grew up in the business and had my first day at 12 years old. The first customer I went up and asked for help, he said, "Yeah, go get someone older." I still get that response today, but now it's a compliment. Steel and John Deere are rated the best in their respective industries. And here at True Value, we have the benefit of carrying and being the local dealers for both of those products. I've always looked at being a salesman as you got to love what you sell. If you love what you sell, it's not gonna feel like it's a job. You're just getting the right equipment for the customer. The great thing about our store is you can do everything through the store here. We have a repair shop, we have rentals. If you don't know how to use it, we go over everything when you rent the product. I myself am a new homeowner, so I am getting an idea of everything that I need for home renovations. Everybody's got a different job, and we want to be a part of that job and help them through that job. It's very important for us to have a happy staff. Our staff is an extension of us. We support a lot of families through this business, and that's what I love. I love it when a customer comes in and says, "Hey Jeff, I need this," or "Hey Brian, I need this." It kind of warms my heart to know that our store has such a footprint in the community. We try to support our community in many different ways, and one of those ways is through donations. We definitely help out all of the local schools. We support Relay for Life, local youth sports, Eagle Scouts, Toys for Tots, many different organizations. It's important for us to be a part of the community and to really make an impact in people's lives.